minus 90 seconds. Speed counting. All systems are go.
Right, the first thing which I did in this was obviously in the song selection. The song's called All I've Wasted by Mind Talk, which was made by my friend Chris, and when I listened to it, I wanted just to kind of sit down and really listen to the song several times and kind of just really get a feel for it and just take notes and write down feelings that the song provoked. And a lot of what I was feeling was like the light and airy tones were giving me a real sense of space. There's, right at the start, there's the airy tones which kind of almost like kind of have this halo feeling and this, you know, openness and vast space, and it also made me think of, like, it gave a sense of a journey, and that was actually something Chris told me before, that it was, he never really planned for it to have a video created for, but he definitely sensed the purpose of it was to kind of, it was this emotional journey. I mean, it's his music, he created it, so that's what he gave me from that. So after I got these brief things about audio and visual, I wanted to go and research into just completely define what a music video actually is. And the definition I found, more or less, was that it's a short film which incorporates a song and visual imagery. So then that led me to go and do some research into audio visuals and their relationship and how they work together, and essentially they break down into several components. Like, you can experience a different emotion on each level. So if you just listen to the song, you will experience something completely different to if you just watch the video with no sound. And then alternatively, you'll experience something completely different if you have both of them. So the audio visual, you experience something different. The sound, you experience something different, and just the visual, you experience something different as well. I took this and then I just wanted to look at modern music videos and just kind of see how they use audio visuals and if they differ a lot. And a lot of them are actually the same. Most modern contemporary music videos have an element of like performance in them, in that the artist will be singing or lip syncing, or the band will be playing, and it just consists of a lot of different cutaways and pan shots and crane shots, etc. Some of them have a narrative which will, the narrative to the video will help be a visual aid to the narrative in the song, because a lot of songs have narrative. A good example of a song with a narrative is The Day I Died by Just Jack. The song is based on the erroneous nature of contemporary life, that every day is a mediocre day, everything goes wrong, and it's boring life living in London, getting the train to a crappy job, and then the one day when everything's going right, is the day that he gets hit by a taxi and dies. So that the narrative in the song is excellently portrayed in the narrative of the visuals, which they enhance the audience experiences on that matter. And there's also ones that have a mixture, which consists of a narrative story, and it will then cut away to the band playing. A good example what I found of that was Wherever You Will Go by The Calling, where there's a narrative and a storyline happening that's based on the song, and then often it just cuts away to the band playing, singing, and crane shots. I think they were under a bridge or something when they were doing it, but that was the pattern that I was finding in modern music videos. So I had this kind of space theme from just listening to the song and seeing what feelings was brought from it, and I wanted to kind of take that further and find some other products and possibly gain some inspirations from this. The first one that I looked at was Watercolour by Pendulum, because that itself had a lot of stuff which I thought could inform my final piece, because it's kind of a mixture of narrative and performance, but there's a lot of space visuals that I could use. And what's good about these ones is that, in contrast to Gravity, they're not like hyper realistic, so they're not completely accurate. Like the colours or the planets themselves are not completely accurate, which was something I quite liked, because it was something that I wanted to use in my own piece. And you see in my own piece that at the start it's leaving Earth, which is an instantly recognisable object for the audience, but the further away we're coming out of Earth, each piece is becoming more unrecognisable. So the liquid planet, which is being controlled by the audience, was kind of based upon this. Further away from Earth you go, the more unrecognisable things become. Gravity I looked at for its visual reference, but mostly because of the use of audio in Gravity, which was fantastic, because they made this so hyper-realistic. I'll talk more on it in a minute. But the use of audio and the way that they made things so realistic was something that I thought I could consider for my own piece. The fact that there's no sound in space, and music video being so heavily reliant on sounds, it would be ironic that it's set in a place where there is no sound. And the other ones I looked at was various different independent audio spectrums that people have made, because I really was interested in the juxtaposition of the audio controlling the image. Quite often, arguably people think that audio comes second to the visual because the visual is the dominant factor, but I quite like the idea of reversing that and having the audio control the visual and kind of making it so that it had to have a form in order to be audible. If there's no sound, then there's no visual either. So it was just, really wanted to explore the juxtaposition of that. Justification and meaning, like I said previously, I really wanted to take the audience on a journey. I did this through the different space scenes and how once you go through one bit you come to another piece. So you go through one galaxy and then you come to a nebula. And also, as I said before, the further we're moving back, it's becoming more abstract. So that shows the progression of a journey because each thing is becoming less and less recognisable. I would have liked, in that particular sense, to include more cuts of different angles of it. I think that some of them were quite not boring, but I could have maybe cut into it and explored each bit a bit more than I did. I began to do it in the liquid planet one, but for example in the first set of nebulas was kind of, it just looked, maybe I could have had to cut to different angles just to kind of keep things moving in a better tempo. The final scene was actually, that idea came to me from, I think, Men in Black, the first film, when right at the end, when it comes that really fast zoom out and it comes through all the galaxy and it ends up with two massive beings playing marbles with the I think the marbles were like galaxies or whatever, but I thought it was a really interesting concept, that because it's something so big, there's no reason why that couldn't be happening. And because inside the headphone is so small that maybe, there's no reason why, I thought it's interesting to explore what happens in that tiny little thing where all these music and emotions come out from. And also, I wanted to explore the audio controlling image, but I already spoke about that. Technologies was pretty much all done in After Effects. Main reason for that is because I wanted to create kind of semi-realistic 3D. I attempted some work in Cinema 4D, but the amount of knowledge I have wasn't enough to create a decent product, and I knew more about After Effects in that its capabilities, and I knew what I was capable of doing with that piece of software. After Effects also allows for expressions, which would allow me to have a greater opportunity of having the audio control the image. In the first, after we leave the Earth and you go to the first nebulas, the brightness is being controlled by the keyframe. The audio was keyframed and an expression was added, which allowed the brightness to be dictated by the tempo of the song, by the levels of the song. Yeah. The biggest trick that I missed was, I think I could have done so much more with the audio that would have made it suitable to the avant-garde genre. I wanted to, after looking at Gravity, I really wanted to explore and experiment with the audio, but the problems I was having was that the two main ideas I came up with for experimenting with the audio was that as we come out of Earth, just to be no sound at all. And I think that would in itself be really pushing the boundaries of what's accepted in a music video. But then at the same time, as I defined in a music video, a music video is a song with a video. So if it hasn't got any sound, then is it a music video? Having said that, I could have, I think, maybe dedicated more time to manipulating the audio tracks in Audition and just experimenting with stretching the pitch and the tone and stuff like that, and just see if there's something semi-realistic that I could come up with. I mean, even in Gravity, they said about the audio was that they figured that because there was air in the astronaut suits, when they touched things, the vibrations in the air, they would be able to hear when they touched things. So outside you couldn't hear anything happening, but when they're touching things like that, you could hear noises that, you know, just very high bass noises. And I also decided to look at like how other products dealt with sound in space, and they really contradict themselves. You either have someone who is really accurate, and like Gravity, someone who they really try to make it as realistic as possible, where all the debris comes and it's ripping apart the satellites. You can't hear anything, and it's just dead silent. And that is really beneficial because it keeps the audience in the suspension of disbelief. And I think in contemporary cinema, I don't think people are so much, I don't think they're as passive as they have been in the past, where they'll sit down and they'll watch what's in front of them and they'll just accept what it is. I think people are more prepared to go to cinema and question and analyse the product in front of them. But then other films, such as Star Wars Episode 4, they really completely ignore the fact there's no sound in space. For example, in the scene where they destroy the Death Star, there's the big explosion when they actually destroy the Death Star. In space, if you were there, you would not be able to hear the explosion because there's no sound in space. But then if you watch that scene back and you put it on mute, do you get such an enjoyable experience out of it? Because you can't hear the ships moving, and you can't hear the cannons firing, you can't hear the star exploding. So is that then detrimental to the scene? You know, does that take something away from the audience? So it was a really difficult situation for me. I decided in the end just to stick with playing the song, but I really now wish that I'd kind of maybe dedicated more time to experimenting with pitch and tone and stuff like that. The biggest thing was, for me, that I could have done better was make it more relevant to avant-garde, and I think that was missed with the audio. I just spoke at length about that, so I won't go over it, won't repeat myself. And I think also I could have spent more time experimenting with audio and visuals. In Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey, there's a really nice piece where they have I don't know if everyone's seen it, it's the slit scan where he's travelling through space and it's flying like this. And in 1968, that was radical. I mean, it's easy if someone said that to you now, we're going to travel through space, I want you to make that for me, you open up After Effects, job done. But in 68, there was the computers were the size of a living room, so there was no way that they would be able to create that with the computers they had. So to create this slit scan, I think would have been a much better representation of the travel through space than it would have been for just the stars flying like I used. And time management. I mean, there are personal circumstances for me which it would be naive to say didn't have an effect on my work, the way I worked. But I mean, I couldn't control the circumstances, but I could have controlled how I managed my time around them. And I think had I managed my time better around these circumstances, I could have possibly allowed for more time to experiment with audio visuals, and certainly to experiment with audio itself. I think that was a big trick that I missed in this project.
I've got to briefly go and check on a class. I'm already a little bit late.
Okay.
I'm going to ask Paul if he can go up and look after them.
Right, cool, yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, I'm sure it'll be fine. I'll open the question.
I'd be happy with that.
What?
Would you be alright just going into 135 and keeping an eye on them? They're cracking on with work, so they've got everything set.
135.
It's just seeing as you're a responsible
It's
adult,
upstairs, Paul.
Yeah.
I much appreciate it.
The first thing I want to pick up on is this relationship between sound and image.
Yes.
Do you feel that you've explored that enough in the sense of a theoretical perspective?
No. In a sense of a theoretical perspective, no. I read, I began research into the relationship between audio and visual, but given the time which I had and aspects such as that, it on the surface and a preconception, it didn't seem to be as in depth as one may expect.
Right,
but
okay.
when I began to research into it, it doesn't just appeal to media. It branches out into so many different areas.
My advice there is that you find the most recent current articles, whether they're online, whether they're on JSTOR, whether they're on Bath University's library site, and you just read the abstracts.
Yeah, I read this one by Mick Grierson. And
Yes, I've read the Grierson.
that was the most relevant one I could find to the type of product I was making, the type of product I was dealing with.
And what does Grierson throw up in the bibliography of that article? Is there any? Did you have a look at the bibliography of the article?
Not the bibliography.
Right. Okay.
I just pretty much read. I was looking for the most relevant.
I think if you downloaded that and had a look at the bibliography, you would have seen names like Foucault. You probably would have seen Horkheimer, Adorno, definitely Barthes, and these. I think you've missed a trick in the theoretical aspect of, if you like, the meaning of meaning and why and what the relationships actually are between audio and video.
Yeah.
I think had you done that, you would have been more informed about how you might have manipulated your soundtrack.
Yeah.
Because the first thing I was expecting was what they call in house music the drop. I was expecting a stop on the last part of the beat, so the sound attack, i.e. the bass drum, and then some kind of drop, an echo, and then it coming in again. And you could have easily done that, and that would have given you your suspension of disbelief of what it's like to be in total silence in space.
Yeah.
I think you could have done it in a way that you could have literally hard cut that soundtrack in Audition and pulled it apart and then just applied the effect and had dead silence. That for me would have been more. It would have given you more impact into that feeling of aloneness, the remote insignificance that life is within space and time. I think you could have done that very easily, definitely. That's all I was going to mention, Dan. So anyone else?
Because you're working for an artist, did that give you any restrictions, or were you free to do whatever you wanted?
It was kind of a bit of both, really. I mean, it was nice in a way that he hadn't created this song with a preconception of how he wanted it to look. A lot of it, he said he built his music kind of from his ears rather than from his eyes. A lot of people would make the music, you know, with an idea of if
I disagree.
to well,
I disagree, but
Yeah.
carry on.
I mean, some people may make the music based on how they would want the video to look, but he just kind of he never had an idea. Some songs he has, you know, he made for a purpose of having a video eventually, but this one he said he didn't, which was really nice for me because then there was nothing. He had no ideas that and nothing that he could restrict me on, and he pretty much just gave me full leash. I mean, he wanted me to. We both agreed that it gave us a sense of a journey, and we just kind of bounced ideas off, and we both agreed on that space was quite an adequate
Topic.
yes.
How commercial do you think your product is?
I mean commercial.
How easily would it be to commercialize? How readily would you be able to put that on MTV?
I don't know.
I know it's a kind of like tricky question because commercial has lots of negative connotations. And,
Yeah,
you know,
I
we don't want
mean-
to be commercial, but yet, you know, a lot of the visuals that you use are very seductive. I can see them in adverts for Ministry of Sound, for example.
Mm.
You know, I'm not saying either way that that's a good thing or a bad
No, no.
thing, and that's probably very lucrative. You know, but how constrained do you feel about? I need to make sure that this is commercially viable.
I didn't really think that way. I was just kind of trying to make it as and certainly with the you know, with the when I use the image of the Earth and the galaxy stuff that people may recognise. I just wanted to make it as recognisable as possible. I mean, I know it's difficult to recognise something that technically no one's really seen. No one can say that they've seen a nebula. Most of the images we see of the nebulas in research on the internet are been generated by someone's, you know, not necessarily imagination, but it's not a photograph by any means.
No, it's a digital representation of firing lots of laser lights into the sky and then receiving data back, and then a computer correlates that data and produces an image.
Yeah. So just wanted to make it as kind of.
I think it has enormous commercial potential, and that's not a negative thing. I just think that's what it says to me. It has very recognisable conventions that anybody can relate to, I think. Especially anybody in the Western Hemisphere of this planet that we live on, definitely. I think it's very easy for anybody to look at that. I just want to go back to your point about musicians. Very rarely do you find a musician that visualises music. The only time they will visualise music is when they use metaphorical terms like, I want this piece of music to be warm, or that's a bit murky. I want to tidy that up a bit, or you know, there are lots of sound engineering terms like that's muddy, or that's tinny sounding, or can we get rid of that distortion there, or can we just stretch this out a bit? I don't think musicians think visually. I know when I used to write music and compose music, I didn't think visually at all. I saw colours, most definitely, colour and texture, but they're very abstract, sort of pure concepts really that you can't really pin down in a visual experience. But I understand I do understand what you're saying. If I heard that piece of music, that visual that you've attached to that piece of music it works well.
I think
the relationship there is strong. Definitely.
I think at that point it may have just been a poor sentencing structure for myself. I didn't necessarily mean that someone kind of builds an image of it while they make kind of
No.
like when someone makes their music, like just
Certainly musicians will hear something in their mind before writing it down in notes, quavers, crotchets, bars, middle eights, codas, outros. Do you know what I mean? That, you know, whatever form they choose to write it in. Definitely, I think that they will hear music, but it's very sort of ominous to say that musicians visualise music. I think if you ask most musicians, they'd probably disagree. But that's fine. That's just something where you need to be
coming
clear
from
on.
a visual,
yeah.
you know, a visual perspective. Anyway, very, very.
You yourself probably would have to look at a piece of visual imagery before composing music, because that's the doctrines that your formative education has put you in. Do you see what I mean? So I think it has a lot of potential. It's a very commercial piece of media that wouldn't look out of place on MTV or whatever. And I think there's merit in that. That's not a negative thing. How avant-garde? I suppose it's avant-garde in the extent that, yes, you're right. We don't know anything past the moon. So pretty much you've got carte blanche to use all the pastiches and cliches of what potentially might be beyond as far as we've been, and I think you do that very successfully. I honestly believe that. I think that works. Definitely. I mean, the journey thing, yeah, it's linear, but I think that you can't really have a non-linear journey if you're sort of going in one direction away from what is instantly recognisable to something that isn't. It's quite interesting that you bring up this understanding of how far away can we get from something before we cease to recognise it.
Yeah.
See, then I think you could have theorised that kind of thing a bit more, maybe. I don't know. What do you think, Ben?
I think we've got to move on to the next one.
No, no, but no.
Thanks so much.